This week on Personally Speaking, our guest is Robert Edsel, a best-selling author. He's a new book out, powerful, beautiful, moving, called Remember Us, about the liberation of the people of Holland by American troops and the gratitude expressed by the people of Holland for the past 80 years. Stay with us. Hello and welcome to Personally Speaking. I'm your host, Monsignor Jim Lisante, and best-selling author Robert Edsel joins me now. Robert is a #1 New York Times best-selling author of 5 books, including Rescuing Da Vinci and The Monuments Men. George Clooney wrote, directed, and starred in a film based on Robert's book, The Monuments Men, helping raise widespread awareness of these heroes of civilization. Robert's latest book is entitled Remember Us, American Sacrifice, Dutch Freedom, and a Forever Promise Forged in World War II. It introduces us to a major element of the war until now untold, the Dutch Grave Adoption Program that for 80 years has paired a local citizen with each one of the 10,000 Americans buried at the Netherlands American Cemetery, or recognized by name on the walls of the missing. Robert is here with us today to talk about this story of freedom, gratitude, and grace. Joining me now, I'm so pleased to welcome to Personally Speaking the best-selling author, Robert Edsel. I'd like to begin talking about this book. Robert M. Edsel has written a book called Remember Us. I want to talk to our listeners and viewers. Please get the book for lots of reasons. And the context is, in some ways, the war, World War II in Holland and the Netherlands. But it opened for me, Robert, when I was reading it, a larger question. You've written Monument Men and other things that focus a lot on World War II. We know that not a few million, but literally countless millions died in that war. You talk about the German occupation of Holland at that time and the liberation by the Americans. Here's my question. When you've taken this much interest in what took place during World War II, and now you see 70, 80 years later that we're still a world at war, I just want to ask a guy who cares about what happens in war, what do you make of our human inability to just stop it and realize that it's always a bad end for everyone, and that to continuously, every generation has to face a new war somewhere in the world? Why don't we get it?
Well, I wish we all knew the answer to that. I mean, I have a 7 and 9-year-old, my wife and I do. So every time I'm looking at bios of men and women that are buried in our cemeteries, those that have lost their lives on all sides, I can't look at a male soldier and not see the face of one of my 2 boys.
Yes.
And the futility of it and the uselessness of it, once it's started, is so painful. And yet the world has always had bad guys. And I think many books that have been written focus on bad guys because people are intrigued about why bad guys are bad guys and why they do what they do. And of course, hubris, ambition, these vanities, which we all have, that we learn ways to manage healthily, and they creep up. I mean, I fight it. But the really bad guys get this toxic brew of these things, and then they have the power to do something about it in the most negative of ways, and millions of lives are lost as a consequence. And that's where the only beauty of war emerges, which is the goodness of mankind, men and women, the courage of mankind, in the case of Remember Us, the compassion and decency of people to promise. We refer to it as a forever promise because it's been 80 years, and so far that's the maximum amount of time it could be. That is forever. Remembering and finding ways to say thank you to these men and women. Those are the stories I like to write about. What makes average people do extraordinary and exceptional things that in a way we shouldn't be so generous with our compliments. It's like people thanking you for writing a thank you note. You ought to write thank you notes. Mom told you to do it. Mom's usually right. You shouldn't be complimented for being decent or remembering people that risked or lost their lives to say your freedom. You don't have to do that, but you should do it. And unfortunately, it's done so little now that when you find something so unique and so moving and so spiritual, there's no other word to use, you have to, when you're through crying, you just have to cry tears of joy. You just have to pay reverence to people and the goodness of them. And there's so many people out there that are like that. You know, we're just so, we dwell so much on the negative and on the things that are wrong. And yeah, our country's got plenty of stuff that's wrong with it, and it always has, and it always will. But there's so much that's right, and there's such a well of goodness and decency in this country and around the world. And I like to write stories that focus on that, not the bad guys.
And that's what Remember Us is. If our readers and listeners and watchers will get hold of the book, you'll find that Robert Edsel writes about the great generosity, the kindness of the people of the Netherlands, of Holland. Here's what I was wondering about, though. We had many, many allies in World War II. Some of them, in the course of time, have kind of forgotten that we rescued them and have actually, in some cases, turned almost anti-American. But there is something in the character of the people in Holland that remembers and is grateful. I just wondered, because you've dealt with them so personally, what is it about the nature of the people in Holland, so many of them, who haven't forgotten to be grateful?
I think a lot of it's circumstance. I think certainly in this area, the people are simpler in a way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's particularly interesting, not that we want to spin off into a historical area, about how Catholicism was crushed in Netherlands in favor of, Protestant, or even moving away from churches. I mean, we see so many churches in portions of the country that are now used in a very respectful way as hotels, as bookstores, et cetera. They've preserved the building, but which is not to say there's not faith there. There is, but it's certainly not the formal church-going thing of Catholicism the way we think of it. When I talk about what the Dutch have done, and my book, Remember Us, dwells on it in such a positive way, deservingly so, that's not to say that there aren't people in the Normandy area of France or Belgium or Luxembourg or certainly the UK that don't venerate Americans to this day. They do. They're people. Those people there. Yes, some of them are adopters of graves at their respective cemeteries. My point is not to try and show one person's a better person or a more noble person than somebody else. It's just to call it like I see it based on the facts. And the facts are that the Dutch, even during the war, were trying to find an answer to this question: how do you thank your liberators when they're no longer alive to thank? During the war, not after the war, during the war. And they came up during the war with an idea of this adoption program. And it started with a parish priest. He was the first one, Father Hoyschen, 32-year-old guy, that was assigned the task of trying to find adopters. And it was done organically. I mean, there were already adopters before anybody had this idea, because they knew some of these American soldiers that were in their homes, and they just thought, it's raining outside. We have a barn. Put them in the barn. We don't have any food. They have food. We'll cook their food for them. We don't have detergent. They do. We'll wash their clothes for them. The Dutch were neutral during World War I. They didn't suffer the immense losses that the French and the Belgians did. So when they lost their freedom in May 1940, that was the first time that had happened in 100 years. And notice, to Americans, they didn't like it. They really, really missed having their freedom. There's a wake-up call there. And they were disorganized. They didn't have a resistance network. They didn't have a black market because they never had to have one before. And it took them a while to get things turned around and organized. So when this portion, the southern portion of the Netherlands was liberated, the rest of the country stayed occupied until May 1945 and went through a thing that's referred to as the Hunger Winter, where Hitler took out his retribution on the Dutch in those areas by trying to starve them to death. You know, you don't want to be on my team? Fine, you can be on your team. I hope you enjoy eating tulip bulbs. But the Dutch in the South, when they were liberated, were so immensely grateful to the Americans, and they made this forever promise that we will watch over your boys like our own forever. And they have done it. They are, no insult meant to my fellow Americans, more American than we are today. They really are.
We're here with Robert Edsel. We're talking about Remember Us, his wonderful new book. And, I want to talk more about the book and about World War II, but I'm always intrigued by family of origin. And Robert, you have a great heart. You, as you said a moment ago, you like to celebrate stories of the goodness of mankind. And I always think there's a source for that particular inclination. So, Alpha, your dad, Norma, your mom, what kind of people were they? And what, when you remember and look back at them, what did they give you that was good stuff?
My parents gave me everything. They gave me opportunity. They taught me right from wrong.
Uh,
The things that I have trouble with, that I'm challenged by, they're not the fault of my parents. It's not that I don't understand good choices versus bad choices. I deal in my own challenges with things. Some I manage exceptionally well that come easy for me, some that are exceedingly hard. I don't, my parents were both born in Oklahoma. My mother was born to not a rich, but a well-off father. And she watched her mother, she knew her mother only in a wheelchair until she died when her mother died when she was 22. She had lupus. She had horrible arthritis. She had every illness that you could have. And her father was there with her mom every single day, taking care of her until the day she died, and then later remarried. My father grew up in the Dust Bowl of Oklahoma, the area Steinbeck wrote about in Grapes of Wrath. He worked two jobs while he went to school. He took care of cattle, and he also drove a fuel truck from age 14 that delivered diesel fuel to farms, because it was a cash money business that his oldest brother, my dad was the youngest of 8, all born at home. And when he was 18, became a professional, his friends used to always ask, "Why is your dad in such a good mood all the time?" And I said, "Go ask him." And they'd come back and say, "Well, he told me, but I don't understand the answer." And I said, "What did he tell you?" Of course, I knew. I'd heard him say it a zillion times. "Well, he said, no one's shooting at me." And what does that mean? And I said, "What were you doing when you were 18? And they said, "Well, I was in college." And I said, "My dad was on a troop ship going to Saipan, Okinawa, and Nagasaki as a 19-year-old Marine. It was the only place he'd been outside Oklahoma, except one time when he went to Texas to go hunting with his uncle." So his view through his life was, if no one's shooting at me, it's a good day. The stock
right.
market's up, the stock market's down. I have all these other problems, but keep it simple. And he did. And so those were the parents that I had that were both World War II generation and Depression era parents,
Yeah.
that understood what it was like to want, to understood what it was like to have the most basic things taken care of for you. And for all of the hardships in the United States in the 30s and 40s, they looked at this country as the land of opportunity and the greatest place on earth. And it is. But they didn't grow up with a sense of entitlement. They didn't have to do combat with social media. They didn't have some of the magnifications that have led to have inflamed, I should say, inflamed self-centeredness, that are all challenges that those of us in this country confront. And so that no one that is watching this program thinks I'm immune from it. I'm not. I'm a product of their generations, but I'm a product of these generations and the tools of technology. And I have to do combat with those things myself. You know, it's two different worlds that I have to reconcile, and I do great many days, and other days I fall flat on my face. And, you know, it's a horrible element of being a human being to fail and make mistakes. It's an inspiring aspect of being a human being, to be able to pick yourself up and try better, and try and just be a better person each day. And so one thing that I'm very proud of, despite shortcomings, is that I feel like the legacy that I will leave our boys will never wonder what was meaningful to me in my life. And it wasn't money, because I walked away from a very successful business career seeking meaningfulness that I wasn't finding there. And there've been a lot of hardships and sacrifices related to that. But as I said in my introduction, and remember us to them, follow a life of service to others, and you will find a rewarding and happy life. You pick your path, it doesn't matter where it is. If it's in service to you, you're going to reach a dead end. If it's in service to others, you will find fulfillment beyond measure. You may have some money and you may not, but your life will be a richer life as a result. And that, to me, is what matters.
Robert Edsel is our guest. Remember Us is the book that we're talking about, and we're also talking about his own personal life. Robert Edsel in his book, Remember Us, talks about the gratitude of the Dutch people to the Americans, and especially the almost 10,000 who died. But you also talk at great length, Robert, about the brutality of the occupation by the Germans, by the Nazis. Did you get a sense, both then and now, are the people from Holland, are the people from the Netherlands, are they people who easily forgive? In other words, when they look at the horrors of what they went through with the Germans, are they a reconciling people, or are they people who still have their backs up about the way in which they were treated by the Germans back then?
I think they've moved on. I mean, surely you're going to find very elderly generations that bear grudges.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the grudges are against their own Dutch people. And they're still coming to grips with and reconciling some people there that collaborated or were accused of collaborating. And it's incredible the power of it's not revenge, but a grudge.
Mm.
The Greeks say, if you want revenge, first dig two graves. And you see some of that attitude with some towards others, where those that you're talking to, you may oftentimes hear everybody's involved in the resistance, and the ones they don't like, everybody was a collaborationist. Well, it's usually not that simple. And what I'm trying to do, and Remember Us, when we discuss a specific personality, the husband of Emily Michels van Kesnick, who was the mayor of Maastricht, who was thrust into a position at 40 years old with 6 mouths to feed, plus his wife, and 3 babies born during the war. And the only income they had was his mayoral position. When the Nazis came in and said, find 10 hostages for us or else, and he did. And the purpose was to make sure that there wasn't any retribution against German troops. He had them released within 48 hours. He, according to one of his daughters, said, I tried to put my name on the list, and they said, don't waste the space. We know where you are. We want other names. There are people that dispute that he said that. And we're into, he said, she said, and no one's ever going to know. My point is not to get into the bickering back and forth. My point is to ask people, suppose you're 40 years old. Suppose you've got 6 children at home and your wife's pregnant. Suppose this is your only source of income, and all you've known is 100 years, and you're the mayor of this town, and all of a sudden the Germans show up. There's 30 or 40 dead people in your town. They're threatening you. They're on the move. They're already in Belgium because they blew right through Netherlands. What would you do? And I don't know the answer, and you don't know the answer either, because neither one of us were there. And that's all I'm trying to do, is make that point. And I did it through a quote of somebody that was there, who years later said, Diego Mendes de Leon said, when we talk about World War II, it's very easy to talk about now. We know it begins in 1939. We know it ends in May 1945. We know the Americans came to our rescue. But when we were there, when I was a little boy living through this, the Germans arriving, that was the new normal. And it looked like it was always going to be the new normal. No, the America didn't want to be involved. We didn't think they'd get involved. We weren't sure once they did that they'd be successful. So it's all well and good in hindsight. And here again, I think hubris gets us into trouble. These things up here, this noggin of ours, is such an amazing gift. But man, it gets us into trouble. Overthinking, drawing conclusions, feeling like we're better than other people because now we have more information and we know. We don't know. I mean, I just think my job when I'm writing a book like this is one, to get the facts straight, and two, to provide context. Because if you don't have the context, I don't need to tell you what you're supposed to think about this, but if I present all the facts and the context right, you'll be presented with some wonderful situational ethics questions and challenges, which you can go off and think about yourself. And that's going to be more meaningful to you as a person and as a reader, because it's going to provoke you to think about those things.
Robert Edsel here. We're talking about Remember Us, his great new book. You know, in the book too, Robert, you talk about, I wondered what insight you had drawn from this, that here we had among the American soldiers going up to liberate Holland, we had Black American soldiers who you point out were the gravediggers. But then back home would not have experienced equal rights. Did anything over there change the game in terms of racism in America?
We can criticize the Army for the most part being more comfortable handing a Black American a shovel rather than a gun. There are exceptions. I have one of each in my book. I have someone who was a Black gravedigger, and I have someone who was part of the 784th Black Tanker Division, one of three different tank divisions, because I didn't want people to see what might be a stereotypical Black American in the gravedigging role without realizing the Black tankers, like other Black combat soldiers, were meritorious, they were brave, and when the firefights started, even people that later would prove to be some of the biggest racists of our country's history, Orville Farbus, couldn't deny the fact that, man, those guys are good fighters, and thank God we had them on our side. So I want people to see both sides of that. But at the same point in time, the United States Armed Forces has done more to advance opportunity for women, racial rebalancing in a good way. I mean, fairness, by providing opportunities to non-whites as well as whites. I mean, they're to be complimented. They've gotten it far sooner than other parts of our society and embraced it. So I think we're being way too harsh or greater to go beyond that in criticism. And I think, frankly, they deserve a tremendous amount of credit because it did provide opportunities. Now, I don't think the problem is with the Army. The problem is with our country. It's with people that, want to continue to litigate a civil war or litigate issues that we've already dealt with. And it's for that reason that one of the characters in the book who lives through the war comes back to the United States after the war, and he sees the same type racism, notwithstanding the fact he was a distinguished combat veteran, that he saw before he went over there, and said, I'm done. And he got a job in Germany working for the United States government and lived there the rest of his life and married a German woman because there were so many people of different backgrounds, races, religions. They didn't care. So I think there's a lot to be learned from that. And the point of having the gravedigger in the story was to desanitize, in a way, our telling of World War II and death. I mean, we're raising children poorly. They don't know. They're not going to have a World War II parent in the family like I did to learn those lessons, or a Depression era parent. We treat freedom like it's our health. We don't think about it until we wake up and we're sick. And when we're sick, I don't know about you, but for me and most of the guys I know, we're kind of wimps. It's like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened. I'm sick. Me, can you believe somebody would do that to me? And 3 or 4 days later, you're fine. Do you think about your health more? No, you don't think about it till you're sick again. That's what we do with freedom. The problem is you can't go get 4 Advil at the grocery store to get your freedom back. And that's part of the message that we're trying to change with Remember Us, is not just to tell an inspiring story, and a story we don't know about with World War II, but to tell a story that is a polite, a loving, I'm putting my arms as an embrace around my fellow Americans, benefit from parents like the ones I had and the lessons they taught us, We have to do better. We have to find a way to work together. We were a country of immigrants. We are a country of immigrants. We will always be a country of immigrants. And that can be glue, like it has historically been, that stands us apart from other countries in the world that may allow immigrants in their country, but they don't integrate them or give them an equal chance. And we still do have that in the United States. Embrace these things that we've got that make us an exceptional country and the blessings that we have, because unless you're in military, none of us did anything for this. I mean, the good grace of grace, I love that word. When I saw the movie 30 Dark Zero, and there's a dramatic scene of a guy in Pakistan selling fruit on the side of a road in a monsoon, why is he there and I'm here? What did he do wrong? What did I do right? Nothing. Those are, the gods or whatever you want to believe in. That's how the cards got dealt. Now, what are you going to do about it? And if you're lucky enough to have been born in this country and get the opportunities to start a fire and then shoot at the firemen when they come to put the fire out and you get hurt and they still call an ambulance and help you, that's an amazing country. Do something about it and find a way to make it even better. That's the obligation we all have. So that's my view.
Thank you, Robert Edsel. Listeners and viewers, please do me a favor and remember us. What you just heard in this interview in terms of Robert's insight into human personality and the power both of evil, because he doesn't spare the war and the horrors of war in the book, but he also talks about the goodness of mankind, the goodness of people who don't forget to be grateful, and the wonderful gift that our rich and wonderful country has given to the world by caring and putting themselves on the line and dying in so many cases for the freedom of others. It's a wonderful book. But Robert, you just, my normal end of interview question you answered many times over. Some people, when they look at the state of the world, you can just sense the hopelessness in them. But you are a man of unlimited and infinite hope. It's a beautiful thing to listen to you because you really believe in the indomitability of the spirit of people, and you have hope for a better future. So thank you for that. Thank you for remember us, and keep on keeping on with your writing and your inspiring words. Very important. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks for being with us on Personally Speaking. If you need to reach me, you can do that at personallyspeakingpodcast@gmail.com. You probably listened to this program on SiriusXM, the Catholic channel, 129, but you can also watch the program on YouTube by searching under Personally Speaking with Monsignor Jim Lisante. We're also on Facebook at Personally Speaking with Monsignor Jim Lisante and on Instagram at Personally Speaking Podcast. I'm privileged to serve as host and executive producer of Personally Speaking. Our producer is Lisa Jandovich. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll be with you again next time on Personally Speaking.